Freja Mikkelsen pedalled across Gamel's Strand just as the sun pushed a thin orange blade between the slate roofs. Morning was always her private hour in Copenhagen, when cafes still smelled more of soap than espresso, and the canals mirrored the sky without interruption from tour boats. She had been a bicycle courier for 6 years, long enough for most of the city's cobblestones to feel like braille beneath her tires. She could ride by touch if she had to, and occasionally did, when the November fog thickened or the spring rain drowned her glasses. But that Tuesday in late August, something unfamiliar waited beside the bronze fishmongers of Højbro-Plads. A chalk line, roughly the width of her thumb, running in a wobbly arc across the square. It forked at the fountain, one branch veering toward Nyhavn, the other pointing south to Christiansborg Palace. At first glance she assumed the line was another street art flourish. Copenhagen collected stray creativity the way gutters collected cherry blossoms. Yet when Freja unfolded the deliveries emailed from dispatch, she felt a jolt. Every address on the docket, 2 cafes, a law firm, an architect's studio, lay precisely along the chalk curve. Coincidence, she decided, and rolled her eyes at her own superstition. Still, she followed the line. It kept her clear of potholes and confused pedestrians. By noon she had forgotten about it entirely. That night she scrawled through DR's homepage while spooning Newsly straight from the box. The headline grabbed her. Historic chronometer stolen from Maritime Museum. The theft had happened just after closing. No alarms tripped, no cameras useful. Freja clicked idly through the photos until one caption mentioned the museum's location. Her stomach tightened. The Maritime Museum sat in Nyhavn, barely 10 meters from that morning's chalk fork. Rational mind cooed. Copenhagen was small. Artistic scribbles and crime scenes overlapped all the time. Yet rational mind didn't sleep well. She dreamt of spinning bicycle wheels made of white chalk, leaving dust clouds shaped like thieves. The second chalk path appeared 2 days later. This time, the line began outside Dispatch's doorway, hand-drawn arrows pointing the exact sequence of her scheduled drop-offs. Anxious curiosity forced her to crouch for a closer inspection. The chalk was damp, as though sketched minutes before dawn dew settled. Whoever had drawn it knew she'd be there at 6, clock sharp. She pulled out her phone and snapped photos. Back on her bike, Freja followed the chalk again, partly because it coincided with efficiency and partly because she wanted to see where it ended. At Kronprinsessegade, the line concluded with an abrupt X beside a municipal trash bin. Nothing special about the bin except that the rust patterned like leopard spots. She knelt, opened the lid, found only coffee cups and a wilted tulip. Later that night the news shouted another headline, Viking jewelry missing from National Museum. The National Museum stood 3 blocks beyond that same trash bin. Freja stared at the computer screen until the text blurred. The chalk line hadn't merely predicted her delivery route. It had traced a perimeter around a future crime scene. She printed her photos and took them to Dispatch the next morning. The office occupied a former meatpacking refrigerator. Metal racks on wheels held packages sorted by neighborhood. Rune Jensen, graying beard, headphones always tilted on one ear, waved her in. "You look like you swallowed brake fluid," he said. "Someone's drawing my route in chalk," she said, splaying the images across a steel counter. "The lines match. Museums that get robbed hours later." Rune squinted, then chuckled. "I'd put money on bored architecture students or performance art." He raised a brow. "If it bothers you, we can change your assignments." It did bother her, but not in a way she could articulate. Changing routes meant surrendering the one connection she had to the mystery. "I'll keep it," she said, gathering the photos. Rune nodded, already drifting back to whatever podcast occupied his off-the-air. The third path came on a Friday, soaked with rain. Chalk hated water, yet the line persisted. as bright as if someone had varnished it. Freya traced it beneath dripping eaves and across shimmering granite squares. In front of Rosenborg Castle, famous for its crown jewels, the chalk narrowed into delicate hatch marks, resembling the whiskers of a cat. Immediately, her mind translated whiskers into hallways and hatch marks into security beams. She was no art thief, but anyone who spent years weaving through Copenhagen traffic learned to read the geometry of obstacles. She waited after work, lurking near the castle moat while daylight waned. At 19:14, a silhouette appeared, umbrella held low. The person knelt, chalk in hand, and extended one whisker a few centimeters, correcting the blueprint. Freya clicked a photo. The shutter sound echoed off the stone. The figure snapped upright, turned, and even at 20 meters Freya felt the assessing gaze. Then the stranger bolted north, vanishing among sycamores. She chased, but wet cobblestones neutralized her speed. By the time she reached the bridge, the figure was gone, leaving only a faint scent of tobacco and rain in the air. That night, Rosenborg's alarm cut through the drizzle at 23:02. Guards found 2 shattered cases, emerald-studded sword hilts missing. Police sealed the area, but Freya had already mailed her photo to herself, enlarging it until pixels disintegrated into digital confetti. The umbrella obscured the face. Only one detail stood out: a left wrist bearing a watch with a square face and crimson strap. Saturday morning she visited her older brother Emil, a sergeant with the Rikspolitiet. He brewed coffee strong enough to resuscitate corpses. While Freya explained, Emil listened, stirring tiny tornadoes in his mug. "You have chalk lines and a blurry photo," he said at last. "Not exactly admissible." "Come on, Milo," she pleaded, using the childhood nickname nobody else dared. "You could stake out my route, catch whoever is writing." He sighed. "Resources are stretched with the heists already. Besides, we don't even know these lines are connected." She slammed her cup down harder than intended. "Open your eyes." The chalk adjusted by centimeters, and that same night, the thieves avoided lasers positioned exactly there. Emil's gaze softened. "I know you're perceptive, Frey, but correlation isn't proof." "Fine," she muttered, rising. "I'll gather proof." He followed her to the door. "Just be careful. Bicycle couriers don't get hazard pay." "Neither do sisters," she said, kissing his cheek. Freya spent the rest of the weekend mapping every instance of chalk she could remember onto Google Earth. Laid over the city grid, the designs resembled a sprawling spiderweb, each museum burglary nested inside one of the web's junctions. But another shape caught her attention. The chalk arcs, when viewed together, sketched an outline of something unmistakably maritime. What looked like the Little Mermaid statue, Copenhagen's most photographed icon. The head formed near Langleni, the tail curled down toward Islands Brig. The next logical target, if the pattern held, would be the place marking the statue's shoulder. The Nekarlsberg Glyptotek. Its collection included French impressionists and Egyptian mummies worth millions. Monday at dawn she left her apartment early, hoping to intercept the chalker. The streets smelled of wet asphalt and rye bread. She hid her bicycle behind a recycling container and perched on the stone steps of a bank, collar up, pretending to scroll her phone. At 5:47, a figure rounded the corner. Same squared watch, same brisk stride. Freya's pulse kicked. The stranger pulled chalk from a pocket and began drawing, head swiveling periodically like a vigilant crow. Freya crept forward, camera ready. A delivery van rumbled by, masking her footsteps. She raised the lens, snapped. The flash forgotten in her haste popped. The figure flinched, then ran. Freya sprinted, mounting her bike in one fluid leap. They tore through Øystedsbakken, wheels slicing puddles, fountains spraying like startled whales. She gained ground, close enough to notice the crimson watch strap was embroidered with tiny gold anchors. Then the stranger executed a sudden hairpin onto a footbridge barred to bicycles. Freya braked, tires fishtailing. By the time she skidded across the wet planks on foot, only silence remained. She collected the dropped chalk fragment. Pale blue, finer than ordinary school sticks, almost cosmetic. As she pocketed it, she felt scraping metal. Leaning against the railing lay a crowbar, slim and blackened, etched with identical gold anchors. Gold anchors. Maritime motif. Her brain spat names. Anchor-themed boutiques, yacht clubs, maritime colleges. Then she remembered the stolen chronometer from Nyavan, the museum that celebrated seafaring heritage. Could the thief be part of some nautical fraternity or dispatch? Her employer's logo, painted on each courier crate, was a stylized anchor. Rune looked up as she barged in. "You're early. We've got extra loads covering Helena's sick day." Freya slammed the crowbar on the table. "Recognize this?" He eyed it coolly. "Hardware store? That's your anchor pattern, same as our stickers." Rune laughed. "Frey, half the city uses anchors. We're a harbour, remember?" But his throat twitched, a faint spasm she'd never seen. "Who assigns routes?" she asked. "Mostly software. I verify special requests." "Like mine?" She stepped closer. "Someone has been downloading my deliveries every night, chalking them onto streets and modifying them to signal break-in details. Could be a hacker, but easier if the person is inside." Rune removed his headphones and folded his arms. "Do you hear yourself? We deliver burritos and legal documents. We're not Ocean's 11. Yet someone has access to tomorrow's manifests by midnight." She lowered her voice. "Give me the server logs or I go to my brother." Rune hesitated, then gestured toward the back office with a resigned flick. 15 minutes, after that I deny everything." Inside the office, neon light hummed over a clutter of routers and coffee mugs. Freya navigated the logging screens. Logs revealed 3 user accounts, accessing the manifest between 23 o'clock and 0:30 each night. One was Rune's admin. One belonged to Dispatcher's billing clerk. The third was tagged AML_Nova, an account she hadn't heard of. The IP traced to an address on Refshel, once home to Burley shipyards, now a mix of art studios and squatters. Rune appeared in the doorway. "Time's up." "What's on Refshalen?" she asked. He sighed. "Old storage warehouse we rent. Couriers keep spare parts there." "Who has keys?" "Any veteran, or someone with a crowbar," he added darkly. She pocketed the chalk fragment and crowbar. "If I'm not back by lunch, call Emil." "Which Emil?" "The cop," she said, and pedalled away. Refshalen rose from the harbour like an overturned ark, corrugated siding rusting into mosaic. Freya chained her bicycle behind a derelict forklift and approached the dispatch warehouse. Padlock broken. Inside, dimness smelled of salt and machine oil. Stacks of courier crates formed labyrinthine corridors. She used her phone light. In a far corner she found a drafting table, plans unrolled. Chalk lines drawn over city maps, layered with laser-printed museum blueprints. Beside them lay bags of specialized climbing gear, glass cutters, and a laptop. On its cover, the anchor insignia, embroidered with gold thread. She plugged in a USB drive and copied whatever she could. While progress bars crawled, she saw something else, a schedule listing heist dates. The next entry read, G16 tonight, 22 o'clock. G16 corresponded per a quick search to the Glyptotek gallery containing Degas' bronze ballerinas. Behind her, a floorboard cried out. She spun. The umbrella-bearing figure stepped into the weak light. Freya recognized the courier jacket, a style discontinued 4 years ago, worn by a man in his early 40s, face sharp as a spoke wrench. Crimson watch strap glimmered. "You're early," he said, voice smooth but winded. "Courier punctuality, admirable." Freya swallowed. "So are you. Planning tonight's masterpiece?" He smiled thinly. "Preparation is everything. Sadly, your curiosity complicates matters." He removed something from his pocket, a vial. Before she could react, he flung the contents, fine powder, into her face. Her lungs seized, eyes watered. She stumbled, vision swimming. The man caught her collar, eased her into a rolling office chair, and cinched zip ties around her wrists. "Never underestimate the power of crushed chalk," he murmured. "Magnesium carbonate masks fingerprints and apparently blinds amateurs." Freya blinked through tears. "Who are you?" "Names, Axel. Former courier, as you deduced. Dispatch cut my hours. I diversified." He opened a locker, retrieving a slim rucksack. "Your root system is genius for coded communication. No pesky encryption laws. Chalk, dear girl, is prehistoric and therefore invisible to metadata analysts. You drew routes on public roads. Anybody could see. But nobody did, except you. Copenhagen glances at screens, not sidewalks." He stepped behind her, presumably to locate duct tape. Freya flexed her calves, feeling the contours of the chair. One wheel was jammed with congealed grease. She angled her weight forward, tipping. The chair crashed, sending starbursts across her vision, but snapping one thin zip tie. She kicked upward, heels striking Axel's jaw. He yelled, dropped the tape. Freya wriggled free of the remaining tie, scrambled. Her path to the door blocked by crates. She mounted a nearby courier bike, tires inflated, chain oiled, ready for flight, as if fate prepped it. She pedaled down the aisle, Axel lunging but missing. At the exit, she burst into sunlight, blinded yet exhilarated. She dialed Emil while swerving for balance. "Warehouse on Refschalun," she gasped. "Evidence of tonight's heist. Suspect heading Glyptotech at 22:00. "Stay put," Emil ordered. "Can't. He's after Dagar. I'm tailing him." She cut the call and ducked into side streets. 10 minutes later, Axel exited the warehouse carrying his rucksack, hopped onto a black fixed gear and sprinted south. Freya shadowed at a block's distance, heart hammering, the city humming with indifferent serenity. Commuters assumed they were two athletes training. They crossed Nipplesborough. Summer tourists posed with ice creams while a felon plotted beyond them. Near Christians shaven, police sirens wailed, maybe for them, maybe for something else. Axel turned onto a narrow alley, dismounted and locked his bike, donning a jacket emblazoned with a plumbing company logo, disguise number 2. He melted into pedestrian flow toward the Glyptotech. Freya followed on foot, phoning Emil again. "He's entering the museum perimeter." "We're minutes out," he said. In the sculpture garden behind the glass-domed museum, staff prepped for a private fundraiser. Axel blended with caterers hauling wine crates. Freya grabbed a clipboard from an unattended table, hoping pretending was contagious. She slipped past a security guard engaged in conversation about salmon canapé. "How handy, you know?" As she hung up her cloak, she thought, salmon canapé. Inside, the marble hall echoed with cutlery clinks. Axel vanished among Corinthian columns. Freja consulted a wall map. Gallery 16 upstairs. She ascended a side staircase, shoes muffled by carpet. Second-floor corridor smelled of polish and linen. Gallery 16 lay dark, roped off until the event. Axel knelt by an alarm panel, screwdriver twirling quick as thought. Freja crept closer, adrenaline dilating time. She spotted an emergency fire hammer in a glass box. She smashed it, alarm bell shrieking instantly. Red strobes lit the room. Axel whipped around, eyes drawing into slits. "You!" he snarled. Guests downstairs screamed as security protocols sealed doors. Axel charged. Freya swung the hammer, missing but forcing him back toward a tall window. Blue lights pulsed outside. Emil's units. Axel glanced, calculating. He tossed a smoke canister, filling the gallery with peppery haze, kicked over a display plinth, and used the confusion to dive through the half-opened maintenance hatch he'd been working on, disappearing into war guts. Farija coughed, clambered after him. Narrow service passage smelled of dust and wires. She could hear Axel moving ahead, boots rattling ductwork. She pursued, hands scraping concrete. The passage opened onto the roof. Wind seized her hair. Axel sprinted toward an adjacent rooftop where scaffolding bridged a renovation project. Police vehicles circled the street below. Amplified voice. "Stop and raise your hands!" Axel vaulted onto the scaffolding. Freya followed, though heights made her stomach invert. Halfway across, the scaffold shuddered. A plank snapped under Axel's weight. He teetered, arms pinwheeling. Freya instinctively lunged, grabbing his backpack strap. Momentum dragged her toward the edge. They dangled together, her left hand clenched around steel pole, right fist gripping his strap. Axel's eyes pleaded, verbal swagger gone. "Let go," he whispered. "We'll both fall." Below waited 20 meters of oblivion. Sirens howled like mechanical wolves. Freya's arm burned. She remembered chalk lines guiding her safely through traffic, remembered the fragile thrill of trust. "No," she said, voice hoarse. "Even thieves deserve a landing." She hoisted, groaning. Police officers reached the opposite end, crawling carefully. One extended a baton. Freya hooked it with her free arm, allowing leverage. Together they hauled Axel onto the platform. The scaffold groaned but held. Cuffs clicked. Freya slumped, lungs ragged. Emil appeared, face pale with terror, then relief. He helped her descend a fire ladder, where paramedics waited. 2 weeks later, newspapers detailed how Axel Lauritsen, ex-machinist turned thief, orchestrated heists by embedding instructions inside Freya's published routes. He exploited the Courier system he knew intimately, disguising laser layouts as minor detours only an accomplice team could decode. The chalk's endurance in rain came from a resin additive stolen from art supply retailers. Freya sat on a bench beside the Little Mermaid, bandaged palm resting on her bike helmet. Tourists snapped photos, oblivious to her story. Emil approached with 2 cans of Tuborg. "Internal affairs say you solved 3 million euros in theft," he said, handing her a can. "I just rode my bike," she replied. He tapped the helmet. "Bruni sends congratulations. Dispatch is renaming your route the Mikkelsen Mile." She laughed. "Sounds like a tongue twister." Gulls shrieked overhead. Across the harbour, cranes danced slow quadrilles. "Funny," she mused. "I never asked why Axel drew the mermaid outline." Emil sipped, found a manifesto on his laptop. He talked about reclaiming maritime heritage stolen by museums from working sailors. The chalk mural of the mermaid was his protest art. Freya nodded, absorbing the irony. He'd aimed to expose theft by stealing. "Will you keep couriering?" Emil asked. She gazed at the winding bike lanes, silver ribbons enticing her forward. "Route change," she said, "but I'd be lost without the ride." She mounted her bicycle, the city breathing promise in every glint of canal water. This time no chalk guided her, yet tire by tire she wrote her own line across Copenhagen. A silent pledge that whatever paths appeared beneath the wheels, she would read them, and if necessary, rewrite them, before nightfall could claim the streets.